It was a cold winter night in Guadalajara, and for Nurse Mariana, what began as a calm shift soon took a dramatic turn. A stray dog named Lupi, with a desperate look in his eyes, brought an abandoned child to Santa Clara Hospital, sparking a series of events that would change Mariana's life forever. The bond between the nurse, the child, and the loyal dog led Mariana into a dark and dangerous journey through the streets of the city, where secrets, loss, and the pursuit of truth would test her courage. What unfolded next was a mystery that reached beyond the hospital walls and into the depths of a tragedy rooted in sacrifice. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Before we dive into this story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It was a bitterly cold, damp winter night in Guadalajara. The city's distant lights flickered like faint stars on the horizon, shimmering against the heavy darkness that had settled over the streets. In stark contrast to the bustling life beyond, Santa Clara Hospital stood eerily silent, its sterile corridors shrouded in an unusual calm. Known as a beacon of hope for the city's most destitute, the hospital usually hummed with life even in the dead of night. But tonight, a strange stillness had taken hold, almost as if the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Inside the hospital, Mariana, a seasoned nurse whose heart beat in rhythm with the pulse of the place, moved gracefully through her night shift. At 35 years old, she had spent over a decade walking these very halls, tending to the sick, the wounded, the hopeless, and the hopeful. While others viewed the night shift as a taxing sacrifice, it brought her an odd sense of peace. She had learned to embrace the quiet hours when the world outside seemed to slow, and she found solace in the routine that came with working under the cover of darkness. The hospital, for all its chaos during the day, transformed into a place of reflection at night, a sanctuary of silence where Mariana could lose herself in her work. Every inch of the hospital was familiar to her. She knew every creaking floorboard, every flickering light, and the ever-present hum of the machines that kept watch over the patients like silent sentinels. The pungent scent of disinfectant and the faint medicinal odor of sterilized rooms was a comfort, a reminder of her purpose. The repetition of her duties, the soft beep of monitors, the gentle rustle of bed sheets, and the rhythmic pumping of ventilators created a steady, predictable rhythm. It was a rhythm she had come to rely on, one that allowed her to navigate the uncertainties of life outside the hospital's walls. As she made her rounds in the ICU, checking the vitals of an elderly patient who had been teetering on the edge of life for days, something strange pierced the stillness of the night. It was faint, barely audible at first, a noise that didn't belong. It was as if the sound had crawled into the hospital from the streets outside, carrying with it the weight of something unnatural. It was a low, mournful moan, undercut by the soft, rhythmic scraping of something being dragged across the floor. The hairs on the back of Mariana's neck stood on end, and her heart, which had been beating so steadily, now quickened with unease. Her years of experience had trained her to remain calm in the face of the unexpected, but this sound, a sound so foreign in the sterile environment of the hospital, unsettled her in a way she hadn't felt in years. She stood still for a moment, listening carefully, trying to place the origin of the noise. Her mind raced through the possibilities: a patient out of bed, a visitor lost in the corridors, but something in her gut told her it was neither. Driven by a mix of concern and curiosity, she left the ICU, her footsteps light but hurried, as she followed the strange sound down the dimly lit hallways. The hospital, normally a haven of quiet activity, now felt vast and empty, the usual hum of machinery and distant conversations absent. As Mariana approached the reception area, she turned a corner, and there, in the soft glow of the entrance lights, she froze in place, her breath catching in her throat. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Standing just inside the entrance, framed by the cold night air that seeped through the slightly ajar doors, was a stray dog. It was large, with matted, mud-caked fur, its thin frame trembling slightly as if it had been wandering the streets for days. But it wasn't the dog's disheveled appearance that held Mariana's attention, it was its eyes. The dog's gaze was fixed on her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. Its eyes, deep and haunting, seemed to plead with her in a way she had never seen in an animal before. And in its mouth, carefully held between its teeth, was something that made Mariana's blood run cold. At first, she couldn't make out what it was. The shape was small, almost unrecognizable in the dim light, but as she stepped closer, her heart sank. The dog, this desperate, filthy creature, was carrying a child. A small, fragile figure wrapped in dirty, tattered rags hung from its mouth. Mariana's hands flew to her mouth in shock as she tried to comprehend what she was seeing. The child couldn't have been more than 2 years old, her tiny body limp and lifeless, as if the very breath had been stolen from her. Mariana's knees buckled, and she slowly knelt, her eyes never leaving the child. The dog, later revealed to be named Lupi, stood perfectly still, watching her with an almost human-like awareness, as if it knew exactly what it had done. There was no aggression in its posture, no wildness in its demeanor. Instead, its gaze was filled with a strange mixture of desperation and hope, as though it was pleading with Mariana to take over, to save the life it had tried so hard to protect. With a gentleness that seemed impossible for an animal in such a state, Lupi carefully laid the child at Mariana's feet, backing away slightly as if to give her space. Mariana's hands trembled as she reached out to touch the child, fearing the worst. But when her fingers brushed against the small, cold face, she felt the faintest flicker of warmth. The child was still alive, though barely. Her pale skin was stretched tight over her fragile bones, her breath shallow and uneven. Mariana's heart clenched with both relief and horror. How long had this child been out in the cold? How had she survived it all? Without a second thought, Mariana scooped the child into her arms, her training taking over as she bolted back into the hospital, her voice ringing out in the once quiet hallways. "I need help." Urgently she screamed, her voice cracking with emotion. A flurry of activity followed as doctors and nurses rushed to her side, the emergency room erupting into motion as they sprang into action. The child was whisked away, hooked up to machines, warmed, hydrated, and monitored as the medical team fought to bring her back from the brink of death. But even as the chaos unfolded around her, Mariana couldn't shake the image of the dog. Lupi hadn't moved. He still stood at the hospital's entrance, watching everything with those same deep, knowing eyes. There was something so profoundly different about this dog, something that made Mariana's heart ache in a way she couldn't explain. It wasn't just any stray. It had known. It had understood the gravity of the situation, and it had acted, and now it waited, as if its mission wasn't yet complete. Hours passed, and slowly, the child began to stabilize. Her color returned, and her breathing evened out, but she remained in critical condition. Mariana, exhausted but determined, sat by her bedside, watching the rise and fall of the child's chest, her mind racing with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? And how had a stray dog, an animal driven by instinct and survival, known to bring her to this hospital at this exact moment? Unable to resist any longer, Mariana made her way back to the entrance. Lumpy was still there, standing as if waiting for her. As she approached, she knelt, her hand outstretched, her voice soft. "Who are you, boy? Where did you find her?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The dog looked at her with those same soulful eyes, and then, in an act that felt almost deliberate, it gently licked her hand. And then, without warning, Lupi turned and walked out of the hospital, pausing only once to look back, as if asking her to follow. Mariana hesitated for only a moment before deciding she couldn't let this go. There was something about this dog, something more than mere coincidence. She gave quick instructions to her colleagues about the child's care, and without another word, stepped into the cold night, her heart pounding in her chest. The streets of Guadalajara were dark and foreboding, the wind biting at her skin as she followed Lupi through the twisting alleys and narrow roads. The city felt different at night, more dangerous, more unpredictable, and yet Mariana felt compelled to continue, as if something far greater than herself was guiding her steps. With every turn, her mind raced with possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. What had happened to this child? Why had she been abandoned? And where was this dog leading her? As she followed Lupi deeper into the night, Mariana couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to uncover something far darker than she could have ever imagined. But no matter what awaited her at the end of this journey, she knew one thing for certain: this night, this moment had changed everything. Under the cold, merciless gaze of the moon, Mariana followed Lupi through the haunting streets of Guadalajara, her heart unknowingly stepping into a nightmare that would alter her life in ways she couldn't yet fathom. The biting breeze clawed at her skin, sending relentless shivers down her spine as she trailed behind a determined dog, whose brisk, purposeful steps cut through the eerie silence. With every hurried step, doubt gnawed at her, stirring an overwhelming sense of unease deep within her soul. Lupi wasn't an ordinary dog, Mariana knew that much. His mysterious arrival at the hospital, carrying the fragile child, had been nothing short of miraculous. And now, As she followed him through these desolate, dimly lit streets, she couldn't shake the suffocating feeling that she was on the verge of uncovering something far more terrifying and profound than she could ever have imagined. The rundown buildings and poverty-stricken corners seemed to close in on her, each shadow whispering tales of hopelessness, disappearances, and despair, a place where even the faintest glimmer of hope was a rare, forgotten relic. After what felt like an eternity of walking, Lupi finally halted in front of a dark, ominous alley. His eyes locked with hers, beckoning her to follow him into the heart of the unknown. Fear clutched at Mariana's chest, her heart thundering wildly, but an unshakable determination forced her trembling feet forward. With a deep breath, she stepped into the alley, her senses overwhelmed by the stench of decay. The air was thick and heavy with rot, and the sight of overturned garbage containers only added to the suffocating horror that pressed in on her from all sides. Lupi, now moving with quiet caution, guided her towards something buried within the filth. Her pulse quickened as her gaze landed on an old, tattered mattress resting against a crumbling wall. Next to it, a pile of rags lay haphazardly, eerily familiar to the ones that had swaddled the baby. Mariana's breath hitched as the pieces began to fall into place. Kneeling, she peeled back one of the rags with trembling fingers, revealing a weathered, torn bag beneath. Inside, she found documents, shocking evidence of a story more heartbreaking than she dared to imagine. A birth certificate, an ID belonging to a woman named Margot Hernandez. This was the missing piece, the key to a tragedy she was just beginning to comprehend. As she clutched the papers, her mind raced. Could Margot be the mother? Had she abandoned her child, or had something far darker claimed her fate? Mariana's gaze shifted to Lupi, the silent sentinel by her side, and felt an unspoken urgency in his eyes. He had led her here for a reason, one that twisted her stomach in knots. Driven by a need for answers, she began searching the alley with frantic determination. But what she found next stopped her dead in her tracks. There, hidden beneath a discarded box, were dark stains, faint but undeniable to a nurse's trained eye. Blood. Her heart slammed against her ribs as a wave of dread crashed over her. Had Margot been hurt? Or worse, had she paid the ultimate price? Lupi whined softly beside her, his loyalty and sorrow palpable, and Mariana instinctively reached out to comfort him, though she was far from calm herself. Something unspeakable had occurred in this forsaken alley, and the truth was creeping ever closer, dark and relentless. Unable to stand the weight of uncertainty, Mariana dialed the police with shaky hands, her voice steady as she recounted the grim discoveries. Yet even as she waited for the sirens to pierce the oppressive silence, she continued searching, driven by a fierce, gnawing need for closure. Then, as her eyes followed the faint drag marks leading to a nearby vacant lot, her blood ran cold. She knew before her feet even began to move that what lay ahead was nothing short of a nightmare. The marks led her to a patch of overgrown weeds, hiding something terrible beneath. Her heart pounded in her ears as she pushed aside the tangled foliage, revealing the lifeless body of a young woman. Her face, bruised and covered in dirt, was unmistakably that of Margot Hernandez. Mariana dropped to her knees, a guttural sob catching in her throat. The horror of the discovery crashed over her like a tidal wave. Margot was dead, her life stolen in this cruel, forgotten place. Yet her baby still lived, saved by the heroic dog who had led Mariana to this devastating truth. As the sirens grew closer, Lupi barked a cry of hope in the face of tragedy. Mariana whispered a silent prayer for the young mother, her thoughts turning to the helpless child now lying in the hospital, unaware of the unimaginable loss she had suffered. As the police arrived, Mariana recounted the grim sequence of events with unwavering resolve. But deep inside, she was shaken to her core, haunted by the weight of what had been uncovered. In the soft light of dawn, as Guadalajara began to wake, Mariana stood at a crossroads. This night had shattered her world, but it had also ignited a fire within her. With Lupi by her side, she knew her mission had only just begun. She would not rest until the truth was fully revealed, until Margot's death was avenged and the child was safe. This journey had changed her irrevocably, plunging her into a world of darkness, but it had also uncovered a strength she never knew she possessed. And so, with a heart heavy with grief but steeled with purpose, Mariana returned to the hospital, ready to confront the challenges that lay ahead. The sun may have risen, but the shadows of that night would follow her forever. As Mariana stepped into the ICU, a wave of tension instantly lifted from her chest when Rosa, the nurse tending to the little girl, approached her. "She's stable, but we still don't know what she endured before being brought here," Rosa murmured, her voice gentle but laced with concern. No severe injuries, but she was severely dehydrated and weak. Mariana exhaled deeply, her heart steadying with the news that the girl was no longer in immediate danger. She made her way to the incubator, where the fragile child lay wrapped in soft bandages and blankets, her tiny body a testament to resilience. The thought that such a vulnerable little life had survived something so horrific shook Mariana to her core. Lupi, who had loyally followed Mariana to the hospital, settled beside the incubator, his eyes locked on the little girl as if he were her guardian angel. His silent watchfulness brought a strange sense of peace to the room, as though he understood his purpose wasn't fulfilled yet. "It's almost like he knows what's going on, doesn't it?" Rosa mused, glancing at the dog. "I've never seen anything like it. He refuses to leave her." Mariana nodded absently, her mind swirling with 1,000 unanswered questions. Who was Margot? Why had her life ended in that desolate alley? And most troubling of all, who was responsible for her death? Just as those questions gnawed at her, the EQ door creaked open, and Dr. Ricardo, head of the pediatric unit, walked in with a grave expression. "Mariana, we need to talk," he said, motioning for her to follow him to his office. Casting one last look at the child and Lupi, Mariana followed him down the hallway, her heart heavy with anticipation. The morning hustle had already begun, the hospital bustling with activity, but Mariana felt isolated, wrapped in the weight of the tragedy she had stumbled into. Once inside Dr. Ricardo's office, he shut the door quietly, the gravity of the situation settling between them like a heavy fog. "We've received a preliminary report from the police," Dr. Ricardo began without preamble, his voice steady but solemn. "They've confirmed that the woman found in the vacant lot is indeed Margot Hernandez, the girl's mother." Even though Mariana already suspected it, hearing it out loud was like a punch to the gut. The reality of Margot's death weighed heavily on her. "And what else did they find?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 2 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. "Margot's injuries indicate she was struck by a vehicle," he replied, his tone darkening. "But the autopsy suggests something far more disturbing. She was likely left to die without receiving any medical help. The police are investigating it as negligent homicide, but it could be something much worse." A cold fury surged through Mariana. The thought of someone hitting Margot and abandoning her to die in that filthy alley was unbearable. And now her child was left orphaned, and even the dog faithful Lupi was entangled in this web of loss and suffering. What about the girl? "Do we know anything about her father or other family members?" she asked, desperate for answers. Dr. Ricardo sighed, shaking his head. "No trace of any family so far. And here's where it gets even stranger. There's no record of Margot ever bringing the girl to this hospital, not even for basic checkups. That suggests she might have been hiding her or running from someone. Whatever happened, it's clear that Margot was protecting her from something or someone." The weight of Dr. Ricardo's words sank into Mariana, sparking a mixture of shock and fierce determination. Margot's life, and by extension her death, had layers of secrets buried beneath the surface. It was becoming clear that this tragedy was far more complex than anyone could have anticipated. "I can't just stand by and do nothing," Mariana blurted out, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I have to help this girl. I can't leave her alone after everything she's been through." Dr. Ricardo's gaze softened with understanding, but his voice remained cautious. "Mariana, I know your heart is in the right place, but you have to think about yourself too. You're a compassionate nurse, but you can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You can't save everyone." She knew he was speaking sense, but something inside her rebelled. This was no longer about her job, it was personal. She felt inexplicably tethered to this little girl, as if Margot's fight for her child's safety had passed into Mariana's hands. There was a connection here, something far deeper than she could explain. "I understand," she murmured, though the fire in her heart told her otherwise. She wouldn't abandon this child, not when there were still so many unanswered questions, not when Lupi had led her to the truth that needed to be uncovered. This was no ordinary case, and Mariana knew she couldn't walk away from it. With a heart full of grief, determination, and love for a child who had already lost too much, she resolved to see it through, no matter what challenges lay ahead. "I know, Ricardo, but I feel like I owe it to Margot," Mariana responded, her voice strong but carrying the weight of her emotions. She fought so hard to protect that girl. "The least I can do is make sure the girl is safe." Dr. Ricardo sighed, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms thoughtfully. "All right, Mariana, Here's what we'll do. The girl will stay under our observation for now. And Lupi, he added with a small smile at the mention of the loyal dog, seems committed to staying right by her side. As for the investigation, we'll cooperate with the police and dig deeper into Margot's story. We'll find out what happened. Mariana nodded, comforted by the thought that at least the girl would be safe for the time being, and that Lupi's watchful presence was a constant reassurance. Though many questions remained unanswered, her helplessness was gradually giving way to a determined resolve. And about your desire to do more, Mariana, Dr. Ricardo continued, his tone softening. If you truly feel this is something you need to pursue, I'll support you. But remember, we're in this together. You're not alone. A faint smile crept across Mariana's face, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, Ricardo. That means a lot to me. With that, they parted ways, and Mariana returned to the IQ, where Lupi remained curled up beside the incubator, ever vigilant. She approached the little girl, watching her fragile chest rise and fall steadily, a sign that, for now at least, she was stable. I'm not going to leave you alone, Mariana whispered, her voice filled with newfound determination. I will uncover the truth about your mother, and I'll make sure you have the future she fought for. Lupi, as if he understood every word, lifted his head and locked eyes with Mariana, his gaze full of unwavering loyalty. He, too, seemed to know that their journey was far from over and that together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The road ahead would not be easy, but Mariana was ready. The connection she felt with this vulnerable child, and now with Lupi, had grown into something powerful, stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. With that conviction fueling her, she began planning her next steps, determined to unearth the hidden truths of Margot's life and protect the girl who now depended on her for everything. In the days following the discovery of Margot's body, the police investigation intensified, and Mariana found herself consumed with concern. The little girl, still without a name, remained in the ICU, surrounded by the diligent care of the Santa Clara hospital team. Lupi, ever the guardian, continued to stay by her side as if sensing that his mission was still incomplete. Mariana, feeling increasingly drawn into the mystery surrounding Margot and her daughter, spent every free moment at the girl's side, even when she wasn't on duty. Watching the child's fragile form stabilize little by little, Mariana felt an unexpected maternal instinct stir within her, a dormant part of herself that had awakened in the face of this tragedy. Lupi's presence only amplified that feeling, as though the bond between them had deepened in their shared purpose. One afternoon, while making her rounds, Mariana was approached by a detective named Javier Sandoval, a middle-aged man with sharp, searching eyes and an air of quiet intensity. Javier seemed different from the other officers who had visited the hospital in recent days. There was a deep commitment in his demeanor that caught her attention immediately. "Nurse Mariana, may I have a word with you?" he asked politely, though there was a firmness in his tone that suggested urgency. Mariana nodded, leading him to a small break room where they could talk without interruption. Once seated, Javier pulled out a folder thick with documents, laying it on the table between them. "We've made some progress in the investigation into Margot Hernandez," he began, flipping open the folder to reveal a series of photographs, reports, and aged documents. "Given your closeness to the girl, I thought it was important for you to be aware of what we've uncovered." Mariana felt her breath catch in her throat, bracing herself for whatever revelations were about to follow. Margot wasn't just a single mother struggling to survive, Javier began, his voice low and grave as he slid an old photo toward Mariana. In it, Margot stood beside a man whose presence was chilling, a hardened face and sharp eyes filled with malice. Just looking at him made Mariana's heart pound with dread. "She was running," Javier continued, "running from someone we've identified as extremely dangerous." Mariana's hands trembled as she picked up the photo, her breath catching as the man's menacing gaze seemed to stare back at her through the image. "Who is he?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, a lump forming in her throat as fear crept in. "His name is Victor Ortiz," Javier said grimly. "He's a criminal with a long history: drug trafficking, extortion, and God knows what else. He was Margot's partner, but their relationship was toxic, to say the least. From what we've uncovered, Margot tried to escape him several times." Mariana's blood ran cold. Victor Ortiz, this dangerous man, could be the girl's father. The thought sent waves of panic through her. The very idea that someone as ruthless as Victor might be hunting for the little girl now lying in the EQ filled her with overwhelming dread. "Does he know she's dead?" she asked, the word sticking in her throat, the question too terrifying to fully comprehend. Javier's face darkened with worry. We're not sure yet, but we do know he was actively looking for her before she was killed. And if he finds out about Margot's death, he'll likely come looking for the girl. Victor is elusive, cunning, brutal, and dangerous. The weight of his words sank into Mariana, like stones dragging her deeper into an abyss of uncertainty. This little girl, so fragile and vulnerable, was now in the crosshairs of a man capable of unimaginable cruelty. What happens now? Mariana asked, her voice trembling with fear and urgency. We're taking every precaution to protect her. We'll place surveillance at the hospital and do everything we can to keep her out of Victor's reach, Javier assured her, his tone resolute. But while his words offered some hope, Mariana couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. This was no ordinary case, and she knew that simple surveillance couldn't stop someone like Victor. Mariana's mind raced, her thoughts spiraling as she considered the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about medical care anymore. There was a storm brewing, and the girl's life hung in the balance. Her instincts told her she had to do more. She couldn't just stand by and watch, not when she felt so deeply connected to this little girl and the tragic circumstances surrounding her. Javier, sensing the conflict within her, paused and met her gaze. I can see how deeply involved you are in this, Mariana, but you need to be cautious. This case is dangerous. One wrong move could put the girl's life at risk. Mariana's heart raced. She understood the risks, but something inside her screamed that she couldn't turn away. It wasn't just about her duty as a nurse, it was personal now. There was an unbreakable bond between her and the child, something that made her feel responsible for protecting her at all costs. I'll do whatever it takes to keep her safe, Detective Mariana replied, her voice filled with fierce determination. But I also need to understand what drove Margot into this situation. If we can unravel her past, maybe we can find a way to ensure the girl's future. Javier studied her, his eyes narrowing as he weighed her words. There's a fine line between curiosity and recklessness, he warned, his tone soft but firm. I appreciate your dedication, but I don't want you to get hurt. If you truly think you can help, I'll keep you informed of what we find. But if you uncover anything, promise me you'll come straight to me, no taking matters into your own hands. I understand, Mariana nodded, feeling a surge of relief that Javier was willing to trust her. You have my word. They continued to talk for a while longer, Javier revealing more about Margot's attempts to escape Victor's control. Each detail painted a darker and more heartbreaking picture of a woman who had lived in constant fear, sacrificing everything to shield her daughter from the nightmare that had consumed her own life. It was a story of survival, a desperate fight to protect the one thing she loved most in the world. When Javier finally left, Mariana sat alone in the room, the weight of everything she had learned pressing down on her. The pieces of Margot's life were slowly falling into place, but the full picture remained elusive. All she knew was that she couldn't let this little girl become another victim. She had to find a way to break the cycle of tragedy, to give the child a future free from the shadows of her past. Her mind spun with thoughts, plans, and fears. But one thing was clear. The girl's fate was now intertwined with her own, and Mariana was willing to do whatever it took to protect her, even if it meant confronting the darkest forces of Margot's past. Returning to the ICU, Mariana found Lupi in his usual spot next to the incubator, his unwavering gaze fixed on the little girl. His eyes flicked toward her as she approached, almost as if he were silently asking what she had uncovered. Mariana knelt beside him, gently running her hand over his head. Don't worry, Lupi, she whispered. I won't leave her alone. We'll find a way to keep her safe, I promise. As her fingers raked through Lupi's fur, a fierce wave of determination surged within her. This was no longer just about uncovering the truth, it was about ensuring the girl had a future, free from the horrors of her past. And Mariana was willing to face whatever darkness lay ahead to protect her. In the days that followed, Mariana remained a constant presence by the girl's side. Every moment she wasn't on shift, she was there, singing lullabies, telling stories, and offering any comfort she could to the tiny, fragile soul who seemed to carry an unbearable weight in her eyes. Detective Javier kept her updated, though the investigation seemed to crawl forward at a painfully slow pace. Victor Ortiz remained elusive, his whereabouts a frustrating mystery, and every day that passed without new leads only deepened the ominous tension. Despite the looming danger, the girl was slowly recovering. Her eyes, large and dark, would flutter open from time to time, searching Mariana's face as if trying to make sense of the chaos around her. And Lupi, ever the protector, would draw closer each time, licking her small hand with a gentle reassurance, a silent vow that he would never leave her side. But no matter how peaceful those moments seemed, Mariana could never fully shake the dread that clung to her. The threat of Victor was like a shadow stretching over them, a darkness that refused to be forgotten. She knew deep in her bones that something terrible was coming. As winter's chill settled over Guadalajara, life at Santa Clara Hospital pressed on, though Mariana's heart never fully rested. Each day she balanced her duties with the gnawing fear that Victor could appear at any moment. Even the faintest disruption of phone ringing, the creak of the hospital doors would send her heart racing, fearing that the man they all dreaded had finally found his way to the hospital. The girl, though steadily growing stronger, remained silent, her eyes wide and watchful. She had yet to speak a single word, but her gaze spoke volumes, filled with a haunting mixture of fear, confusion, and something that resembled hope whenever Mariana or Lupi came close. Lupi, however, had grown even more vigilant. His behavior had shifted in subtle but unmistakable ways. His posture was alert, and his senses seemed heightened. It was as though he could feel the approach of something unseen, something terrible on the horizon. He rarely rested, always poised as if he knew the worst was yet to come. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 3 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. It was on a particularly cold afternoon, with the winds howling through the streets of Guadalajara, that everything began to unravel. Mariana was at her station reviewing medical charts when she heard hurried footsteps approaching. Rosa, her colleague, rushed in, her face pale with concern. "Mariana, there's someone at reception asking for you," Rosa said, her voice trembling slightly. "He says he's an old friend." Mariana felt her blood run cold. Her worst fears seemed to solidify in that single moment. Ever since Javier had first mentioned Victor Ortiz, she had lived in a state of dread, knowing it was only a matter of time before he surfaced. And now, that moment had come. She forced herself to remain calm, even as her heart pounded in her chest. "What does he look like?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Rosa hesitated, her brow furrowing. "Tall, dark hair and cold eyes," she replied, the words lingering in the air like a death sentence. "He said his name is Victor." A jolt of fear shot through Mariana, but she swallowed it down, forcing herself to think quickly. She couldn't panic, not now. If Victor was here, there was no telling what he was capable of or what he would do to find the girl. She needed to act fast, but she also couldn't ignore this. The safety of the girl, and possibly everyone in the hospital, depended on what she did next. "I'll go see him," Mariana said, her voice firm despite the fear roiling inside her. "But I need you to alert security and call Detective Javier. Tell him Victor is here." Rosa nodded, her face pale, before rushing off to follow Mariana's instructions. Alone for a moment, Mariana steeled herself, taking a deep breath before heading toward reception. Her mind raced with questions and dread. What would she say? How would she protect the girl if Victor forced his way in? Would Lupi sense the danger and act? As Mariana approached the reception area, she spotted him immediately. Victor Ortiz stood tall, his figure dark and imposing, just as terrifying as the photo Javier had shown her. His eyes were as cold and lifeless as she had imagined, and the moment he saw her, a twisted smile crept onto his lips. "Mariana," he said smoothly, his voice dripping with false charm, "I've been looking for you." Her heart hammered in her chest, but she met his gaze without flinching. "What do you want, Victor?" she asked, keeping her tone as even as possible. He tilted his head, his smile growing darker. "You know what I want. Margot's little girl." Mariana's heart pounded in her chest as Victor Ortiz's cold gaze bore into her. Every instinct told her to run, but she couldn't. She had to protect the girl. "Rosa, go to the EQ and don't leave the girl's side," she had ordered just moments before, her voice laced with urgency. "Make sure the security guard is notified now." Standing face to face with the man Margot had feared most, she was alone in the reception area, gripping the edge of the counter to steady herself. Victor's smile was anything but friendly. It was a chilling facade, barely concealing the darkness beneath. "Mariana," right, his voice was deceptively calm. "They told me you're taking care of my daughter. I'm here to take her with me." Mariana's throat tightened, her fear gnawing at her composure. She had known this confrontation was inevitable, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer malice in Victor's eyes. "Mr. Ortiz, your daughter is still recovering. It's too soon for her to leave." She needs medical care. Taking her now could put her at risk. Victor stepped forward, his intimidating presence making Mariana instinctively move back. His voice lowered to a threatening growl. "I'm not asking for your opinion, nurse. I'm taking my daughter, and there's nothing you or anyone else can do to stop me." Desperation surged through Mariana. She needed to stall him, to find a way to keep him from taking the girl. But she also knew that provoking Victor could be dangerous. Her mind raced as she tried to remain calm. "Please, Mr. Ortiz," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "If you care about your daughter's well-being, you'll let her stay here where we can ensure her recovery. You can visit her, but moving her now would be too dangerous." Victor's eyes narrowed, irritation flashing across his face. He leaned in closer, his breath hot against her skin. "Don't push me, Mariana," he whispered menacingly. "I don't take kindly to people who get in my way." Mariana's pulse quickened, but before she could respond, the door to the reception swung open, and Detective Javier strode in, flanked by 2 police officers. The tension in the room was palpable, but Javier's arrival was like a lifeline. He immediately positioned himself between Victor and Mariana, his voice steady and commanding. "Victor Ortiz, you violate a restraining order by being here. I suggest you leave immediately." Victor's expression darkened, his contempt for Javier clear. For a moment, it seemed as though he might push back, but even he knew that this was not the time or place to make a scene. His eyes flicked from Javier to Mariana, and the threat in them was unmistakable. "This isn't over," he spat before turning on his heel and walking out of the hospital. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving the room in a thick, suffocating silence. Mariana felt her legs weaken beneath her, the adrenaline draining from her body. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath until she finally let it out in a shaky exhale. Javier turned to her, his face a mixture of concern and professionalism. "Are you okay?" he asked, his tone gentle. Mariana nodded, though her body was still trembling. "I'm okay, but he'll come back, won't he?" Javier's expression hardened. "Yes, he will," he admitted, his voice grim, "but we'll be ready for him. I'm not going to risk your safety or the girls." Mariana swallowed, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. "What happens now?" "We'll increase security around the hospital, and I'll assign officers to watch over the ICU," Javier replied. "But this is just the beginning, Mariana. Victor is a dangerous man, and he doesn't give up easily." Mariana's mind raced. The threat wasn't gone, it had only retreated, lurking in the shadows, waiting for another opportunity. She knew Javier and the police would do what they could, but the danger felt overwhelming, and the responsibility of protecting that little girl weighed on her like a crushing force. "I'm scared," Mariana confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Javier placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze steady. "You have every right to be, but you're not alone in this. We'll make sure you're both safe." Mariana nodded, though deep down, she knew the road ahead was going to be perilous. The hospital might offer temporary protection, but Victor wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. And as much as she hated to admit it, Mariana feared that no amount of security could keep him away forever. As the icy winds of Guadalajara continued to howl outside, Mariana steeled herself for the battle ahead. She had promised Lupe and the girl that she would protect them, and no matter how dangerous the path became, she wouldn't let them down. Mariana thanked Javier, but the reassurance she sought still eluded her. The weight of Victor's threat hung over her like a storm cloud that refused to clear. When she returned to the EQ, her heart skipped a beat seeing Lupe sitting beside the little girl's bed, his low growl rumbling as if he could still sense Victor's presence. Even though the man was gone, Rosa was quietly tending to the girl, but the tension in the room was palpable. Lumpy stood and approached Mariana, pressing his head against her leg in a comforting gesture. Mariana knelt and wrapped her arms around the dog, burying her face in his fur as the tears she had held back since the confrontation with Victor finally fell. "Everything's fine," Lupe, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, trying to convince herself as much as him. "We're going to protect her. We'll find a way." The days that followed were a blur of heightened security and constant vigilance. Police officers were stationed throughout the hospital, their presence meant to deter Victor from returning, but Mariana's nerves were frayed. Every unfamiliar face and every unexpected noise made her heart race, her mind jumping to the worst possibilities. She knew Victor was relentless, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. But even as fear gnawed at her, A deep resolve began to grow within her. She couldn't keep living in fear, waiting for Victor to make his move. She needed to take control, to understand the full story behind Margot's tragic life, and how this innocent little girl was caught in the middle of it all. The only way to stop Victor was to face the darkness head-on, to uncover the truth. As the nights in Guadalajara grew longer and colder, Mariana knew she had to act. She couldn't sit idly by, hoping the police protection would be enough. The girl's life and her own was at risk, and Mariana wasn't about to wait for Victor to return and finish what he'd started. With Lupe by her side, she felt the strength to fight back. She picked up her phone and called Detective Javier Sandoval. Since the night of the confrontation, they had kept in contact, but now, more than ever, she needed his help. "Javier, we need to talk," Mariana said, her voice steady and determined. "There's more to this story than we realize. I need to understand what's going on." Javier, who had come to admire Mariana's courage, didn't hesitate. "Meet me at my office in an hour," he said. "We'll go over what we know and figure out our next move." An hour later, Mariana sat in Javier's office, a small functional space in the heart of downtown Guadalajara. The walls were lined with photographs of solved cases, while the shelves groaned under the weight of thick case files. Javier's desk was cluttered with papers, documents, and files, evidence of how deeply he was entrenched in the investigation. His expression was serious as he shuffled through the papers in front of him. "Victor Ortiz is a ghost," Javier began, sitting across from Mariana. "We've been trying to track him down for weeks, but every lead goes cold. He's careful, and he knows how to stay hidden." Mariana listened intently, her fingers gripping the armrests of her chair. "What about Margot?" she asked. There has to be more to her story. Why did she stay with him for so long? Why did she run when she did? Javier sighed, pushing the folder toward her. "Margot's past is complicated. From what we've gathered, she got involved with Victor when she was young, too young to understand what kind of man he was. By the time she realized how dangerous he was, she was trapped. She tried to leave him several times, but every time he found her. Until now." Mariana opened the folder, her eyes scanning the pages, photos of Margot, police reports detailing incidents of domestic violence, witness statements from neighbors who had heard shouting and seen Victor's violent outbursts. It was worse than she had imagined. "She must have been terrified," Mariana murmured, feeling a pang of empathy for the woman who had fought so hard to protect her daughter. But why run with the girl now? What changed? Javier leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed in thought. "We're still trying to figure that out. But we do know this. Margot wasn't just running from Victor. She was running from something bigger. She had uncovered something about him, something that made her desperate to get out." Mariana's heart raced. What did she find? "We're not sure yet," Javier admitted, frustration evident in his voice. "But we're working on it. Whatever it was big enough for her to risk everything to keep her daughter safe." Mariana stared at the files, her mind racing. There were still so many unanswered questions, but one thing was clear. The little girl was at the center of all of this. Margot had sacrificed everything for her, and now it was up to Mariana to ensure that her sacrifice hadn't been in vain. "We need to find out what Margot discovered," Mariana said, her voice filled with determination. "It's the only way to stop Victor." Javier nodded, his expression resolute. "I agree. But we have to be careful. Victor is dangerous, and if he finds out we're digging into his business, he'll come after anyone involved." Mariana took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I'm not afraid. I just want to protect her." Javier's eyes softened, his respect for Mariana growing. "You're braver than most people I know, Mariana. We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise, but we have to be smart about it." As Mariana left the police station, the cold Guadalajara wind biting at her face, she knew the road ahead would be dangerous. But with Javier's help and Lupe by her side, she felt more determined than ever to uncover the truth. Whatever Victor was hiding, whatever had driven Margot to run, Mariana would find it, and she would make sure that little girl had the chance at a life free from fear. "Mariana, before we dive in, I want you to know I understand what you're going through," Javier began, his voice calm but weighted with empathy. "Victor Ortiz is dangerous, and by trying to dig deeper into his world, you're taking a huge risk. But I also know you won't stop until you find answers, and that's why I'm here to help you every step of the way." Mariana felt a surge of gratitude. She had never imagined herself in the middle of something so perilous, but there was no turning back. "Thank you, Javier. I just feel like there's something crucial we haven't uncovered yet, something that could change everything and help us protect this girl from Victor." Javier nodded in agreement, reaching for a thick file from his desk and laying it in front of her. This is everything we've got on Margot Hernandez. It covers her life with Victor, her attempts to escape, and the last few months before her death. It's not an easy read, but it's the closest we've come to understanding her world. Mariana opened the file, each page a window into the harrowing life Margot had endured. Every report and every statement painted a picture of a woman trapped in a nightmare, with Victor's influence looming over every aspect of her life. He had isolated Margot, manipulated her, and threatened anyone who offered her help. As Mariana read, the horror of Margot's situation became clearer and more heartbreaking. Javier pointed to a police report dated just months before Margot's death. This was when Margot got a restraining order against Victor, but as you'd expect, he didn't care. He kept coming after her, and no one could stop him. He had everyone too scared. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 4 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Mariana scanned the report, her heart aching for the woman who had fought so hard to protect her daughter. But something was missing. Javier, what about Margot's family? Did she have anyone else, parents, siblings, someone who might have helped her? Javier flipped through several pages before finding the section on Margot's family. Her parents passed away in a car accident a few years back. She had no siblings, and the only living relative we know of is a distant aunt in another state. From what we can tell, Margot was completely alone. Victor made sure she had no way out. Mariana felt a deep sadness settle in her chest. Margot had been isolated in every possible way, with no one to turn to, nowhere to hide. Now the only remnant of her life was that little girl, a child who had been born into tragedy, a child who had no idea of the danger still lurking. Javier pulled out a photo and slid it across the table. There's something else. This picture was taken shortly before Margot fled. Take a closer look. Mariana studied the image. At first glance, it seemed like a typical photo of Margot and Victor, but in the background, nearly hidden, was a man with a hat partially obscuring his face. His eyes, however, were unmistakable, dark, watchful, and strangely complicit. Who is he? Mariana asked, her finger resting on the figure in the background. We're not sure yet, Javier replied, his voice growing more serious. But we think he's one of Victor's inner circle. We've been trying to identify him, but so far he's managed to stay under the radar. Mariana stared at the man in the photo, a chill running down her spine. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just an observer, he was a player in the dangerous game Margot had tried so desperately to escape. And now, he could be involved in something far worse. We need to find out who he is, Mariana said, her voice filled with determination. If he's working with Victor, he might know more than anyone else about what happened to Margot. He could be the key to finding Victor. Javier nodded, his expression matching her intensity. My team is already on it. But until we know more, you need to stay vigilant. Victor won't give up easily, and I don't want you or the girl to be caught off guard. Mariana felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her, but she wasn't backing down. I'll keep watching over the girl at the hospital. Just keep me updated. We need to figure this out before Victor makes another move. Javier stood up, offering a firm but reassuring smile. You've got my word, Mariana. We'll uncover the truth. You're not alone in this. As she left Javier's office, the weight of the responsibility she had taken on settled more deeply in her bones. Margot had been running for so long, trapped by a web of lies, fear, and manipulation. Mariana couldn't change what had happened to her, but she could protect the little girl who was still living in the shadow of that nightmare. Back at the hospital, the tension was ever present. Lupi, as always, remained at the girl's side, his watchful eyes ever alert. Mariana stroked his head, her heart heavy with the enormity of what lay ahead. Don't worry, Lupi, she whispered, feeling his warmth under her hand. We're going to figure this out. We'll protect her, no matter what it takes. As night fell once again over Guadalajara, Mariana knew the fight wasn't over. The threat of Victor Ortiz was still out there, lurking in the shadows. But with Javier's help and Lupi's unwavering loyalty, she had one unwavering goal: to ensure that the girl Margot had fought so hard to protect would have the future her mother had dreamed of, a future free from fear. As Mariana left the police station, the chill of the Guadalajara morning air clung to her. But inside, she was fueled by determination. There was no turning back. She was committed to uncovering the truth, and above all, protecting the little girl who now depended entirely on her. Upon her return to the hospital, Mariana went straight to the IQ. There, as always, was Lupi, faithfully guarding the girl's incubator. The little one lay asleep, her tiny fists clutching the blanket. Mariana bent over, gently kissing her forehead. "I'm going to take care of you, little one," she whispered, making a silent vow. "No matter what happens." Lumpy lifted his head, his loyal eyes meeting hers, as though he too understood the weight of the promise. His watchful presence was unwavering, almost as if he had made his silent vow. Mariana spent the day attending to her patients, the routine a welcome distraction. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, an uneasy feeling began to settle in her chest. The hospital grew quieter, and the shadows lengthened, but Mariana couldn't shake the sense that something was coming, something she had dreaded for days. And then her fear became a reality. As the hospital slipped into its usual nighttime lull, the soft beeps of machines and hushed whispers of nurses were the only sounds, and a shadow moved through the hallways. Hidden by the cover of night, Victor Ortiz had returned, his intentions clear and dangerous. He wasn't leaving without his daughter this time. Mariana felt the tension before anything happened, a creeping instinct warning her. She noticed Lupi pacing near the girl's bed, more restless than she had ever seen him. His growls were low, his ears pricked up in alarm. Something was wrong. Mariana's phone buzzed in her pocket, the sudden vibration sending a jolt of panic through her. It was a message from Javier. "Mariana, be careful. We received a tip that Victor might be at the hospital tonight. Protect the girl." Her heart nearly stopped. Victor was here. She had to act fast. Leaving the patient's room, Mariana sprinted down the hospital's dimly lit hallways, her mind whirling with fear and uncertainty. What would she do if she came face to face with Victor? How could she protect the girl? When she reached the IQ, Lupi was already on high alert, his growls growing louder, more insistent. His eyes were fixed on the door, a warning that someone was coming. Mariana rushed to the girl's bedside, checking to make sure she was still safe. The child's eyes remained closed, but her small face twitched as if she were trapped in a disturbing dream. "Lupi, we need to get her out of here," Mariana whispered, her voice trembling with urgency. She gently lifted the girl from the bed, cradling her in her arms. The dog immediately followed, his protective instinct fully engaged. Mariana knew they had little time. If Victor was in the hospital, he would stop at nothing to find the girl. She couldn't stay in the IQ, a place too exposed and predictable. She needed to find somewhere to hide, somewhere safe enough to wait until the police arrived. With the girl in her arms and Lupi at her side, she slipped out of the ICU, moving swiftly and silently down the hallways. Her heart raced as she weighed her options. The hospital was quiet now, but it could change in an instant. Victor could be lurking around any corner. Her mind raced through the possibilities until she remembered the deactivated wing of the hospital, the old pediatric section that had been shut down for years. It was isolated, abandoned, and forgotten by most. If they could reach it, it might buy them enough time. With Lupi beside her, Mariana hurried through the darkened corridors, the air thick with tension. Every shadow seemed to hold danger. Every sound made her glance over her shoulder in fear. Lupi's growls never ceased, his senses on high alert. They weren't alone. Finally, they reached the deactivated wing. The air here was stale and cold, the walls lined with dust-covered medical equipment. Beds lay abandoned, draped in white sheets, and the once bustling rooms now felt eerie and forgotten. It was the perfect hiding place, but also unnerving in its isolation. Mariana stepped into one of the rooms, her breath shaky. She carefully laid the girl down on one of the old beds, tucking the blanket around her tiny body. Lucy immediately took his position beside the bed, his eyes glued to the door, ready to defend them at any moment. Mariana locked the door, her heart pounding. In the dark silence of the deactivated wing, time seemed to stretch on forever. Every second felt like an eternity as she waited, holding her breath, knowing that Victor was out there somewhere, searching for them. The sound of distant footsteps echoed through the halls, growing louder with each passing moment. They were slow, deliberate, a predator stalking its prey. Mariana's body tensed, and her pulse quickened. She glanced at Lupi, who remained steadfast by the girl's side, his growls low and menacing. He was ready to fight. But Mariana knew they couldn't rely on the dog alone. She needed to think, and quickly. With her back against the door, Mariana gripped her phone, praying for a message from Javier. The footsteps grew closer, and the dread that had been gnawing at her heart for days suddenly overwhelmed her. Victor was coming, and he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. But Mariana wouldn't let him. She had promised to protect this girl, and no matter what, she wasn't about to break that promise. Mariana quickly typed a message to Javier. "We're in the deactivated wing. We need help now." Time seemed to crawl as she waited, every sound amplified, every creak of the old hospital building sending jolts of fear through her body. The footsteps outside grew louder, deliberate, and menacing. Mariana's heart pounded in her chest as she held the little girl tightly, her breath catching in her throat. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Mariana froze, and so did Lupi, his growls growing more intense, his body tense, ready to defend. The door handle slowly turned, and at that moment Mariana felt the cold grip of terror. The door creaked open, revealing Victor Ortiz, his face twisted into a cruel smile, his eyes locked on the girl in Mariana's arms, a chilling satisfaction dancing behind his gaze. "I thought I made it clear," Victor sneered, stepping inside the room. "She belongs to me." Mariana's pulse raced, but she squared her shoulders, refusing to back down. "I'm not going to let you take her," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Victor's smile widened, mocking her resistance. "You think you can stop me?" His voice was venomous, dripping with malice as he took another step forward. But before he could get any closer, Lupi sprang into action. With a fierce growl, the dog lunged at Victor, knocking him to the ground. Victor barely had time to react as Lupi's teeth sank into his arm, pinning him down with sheer force. Victor let out a pained cry, trying to fend off the dog, but Lupi's grip was unrelenting. At that moment, Javier and the police burst through the door, guns drawn. "Let go of the girl, Victor, and put your hands up," Javier commanded, his voice ringing with authority. Victor, still struggling beneath Lupi, tried to wriggle free, but the dog held firm. Javier stepped forward, his eyes hard. "Lupi, now," he ordered. With a firm command, Lupi released Victor and stepped back, standing protectively beside Mariana and the girl. The police swiftly moved in, handcuffing Victor, who fought furiously but was no match for them. His eyes flashed with rage, but he was powerless. Mariana, clutching the girl to her chest, backed further away, watching in disbelief as the nightmare came to an end. Javier approached her, concern etched across his face. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, his eyes scanning her for any signs of injury. Mariana nodded, a wave of relief finally washing over her. "Yes, we're fine," she said, though her voice trembled from the intensity of what had just happened. Victor, now subdued and dragged to his feet by the officers, shot one last threatening glare at Mariana before being led out of the room. "This isn't over," he hissed as they took him away, but his words felt hollow in the face of his defeat. Javier placed a reassuring hand on Mariana's shoulder, his voice softening. "You were incredible. We'll make sure Victor doesn't get another chance to come after you or the girl." Mariana smiled, the weight of fear slowly lifting from her shoulders. "I couldn't have done it without Lupi," she said, kneeling to pet the dog. Lupi, panting but alert, pressed his head into her hand, sensing that the danger had passed. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 5 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. As Victor was taken from the hospital in handcuffs, a sense of calm returned to Santa Clara Hospital. For the first time in days, Mariana felt a sense of peace. The little girl was safe for now. The immediate threat had been dealt with, but she knew there was still a long road ahead, one filled with healing, not just for the girl, but for herself as well. In the days following Victor Ortiz's arrest, the atmosphere in the hospital transformed. The cloud of fear that had hung over them dissipated, but the story of the heroic dog and the nurse who protected a little girl spread quickly throughout the city. The local media latched onto the tale, with headlines celebrating Lupi's bravery and Mariana's steadfast courage. The hospital became a focal point of attention, with journalists eager to capture every detail of the dramatic rescue. Lupi, who had once been an unnoticed stray, now roamed the hospital halls like a hero, his loyalty and bravery winning the hearts of everyone he encountered. He became a beloved member of the IQ, where patients and staff alike took comfort in his presence. For Mariana, though the immediate danger had passed, a new weight had settled on her. The little girl, still recovering, had not spoken a word since the ordeal. Her large dark eyes followed Mariana everywhere, filled with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Mariana could see the trauma lingering in those innocent eyes, and she knew the path to healing would be long and difficult. But Mariana was determined. The bond she felt with the girl had only grown stronger, and she was ready to be there for her, to give her the care and love she needed. She spent every moment she could by the girl's side, soothing her with soft words, hoping to bring some sense of security back into her fragile world. Lupi, now fully integrated into the hospital's daily life, never left the girl's side. His protective instincts remained as sharp as ever, and his presence offered a sense of peace to everyone who encountered him. He had become the symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder of how loyalty and bravery could turn the tide even in the darkest of times. Mariana knew the journey wasn't over. The girl's future was still uncertain, and the scars left by Victor Ortiz's cruelty would take time to heal. But she also knew, deep in her heart, that they would face whatever came next together. She, Lucy, and the little girl had become a family of sorts, a family bound not by blood, but by shared survival and the determination to build a new future, free from fear. And for the first time in a long time, Mariana felt hope. The darkness had been defeated, and while there was still much to do, she knew they were strong enough to face it together. Oh, as Mariana sat across from Javier in the small, dimly lit room, the weight of his words settled heavily in the air between them. She listened in silence as he unfolded the complexities of Margot's life, her heart sinking with each revelation. Margot's world had been far more dangerous and complicated than Mariana had ever imagined. She had been married to a man named Alejandro Vargas before Victor, and through no fault of her own, had been dragged into the violent world of cartels and crime. Javier's revelation about Alejandro's death in a gang confrontation hit Mariana hard. It was no wonder Margot had tried to escape that life. But the cruel irony was that she had found herself trapped once again in a different kind of prison with Victor, a man who promised protection but delivered only control and abuse. The story unfolded like a tragedy, with Margot desperately trying to protect a child caught in the middle of this chaos. But then came the biggest shock. This girl, who Margot had risked everything for, wasn't biologically hers. Margot had adopted her in secret, likely from another desperate situation, and had loved her as her own. It made Margot's sacrifice even more poignant. Mariana stared at the documents on the table, her mind reeling. So the girl, she has no family. No one to claim her, she said softly, the gravity of the situation settling in. The thought of this little girl, who had already endured so much, being left to navigate the cold and impersonal adoption system filled Mariana with dread. Javier met her gaze, his expression serious but compassionate. That's right. Legally, she's a child without parents now. If no one steps forward, she'll be placed into the system. But he paused, as if weighing his words carefully. There is something you can do. Mariana's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? She asked, leaning forward slightly, her voice tight with anticipation. You could apply for temporary custody to adopt her, Javier explained. It's a legal process. You'd need to prove you're capable of caring for her. But with everything you've already done for her, I don't think anyone would deny your request. The words hit Mariana like a wave. Temporary custody, adoption. The idea of becoming this girl's legal guardian had never crossed her mind. But now, as Javier laid out the possibility, it felt like the only option. From the moment Lupi had brought the girl to the hospital, Mariana had felt an unexplainable connection to her. It was as if fate had tied them together. And now that connection was stronger than ever. Mariana looked at Javier, her eyes filling with determination. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady and resolute. I'll do whatever it takes to protect her. I can't let her go through this alone. Javier smiled, a mixture of respect and admiration in his expression. I knew you'd say that, he replied, standing up. We'll get started on the process immediately. I'll help you every step of the way. Mariana's mind raced with the magnitude of what she had just committed to, but her heart was at peace. She had no doubts. This little girl, who had already lost so much, needed someone to fight for her, to give her a life filled with love, care, and protection. And Mariana was ready to be that person. As they left the room, walking back toward the IQ, Mariana felt a deep sense of purpose wash over her. The road ahead would be difficult, she knew that. The legal system, the emotional challenges, and the weight of becoming a mother overnight were daunting. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the girl. The little girl who had survived so much and who now needed someone to stand by her side. When Mariana returned to the IQ, she found Lupi lying beside the girl's bed, as vigilant as ever. The girl was sleeping, her tiny hand gripping the blanket, her face peaceful despite everything she had been through. Mariana gently placed her hand on the girl's head, brushing the lock of hair from her forehead. I'm going to take care of you, little one, she whispered, her voice full of love and promise. You're not alone anymore. Lumpy lifted his head, his loyal eyes meeting Mariana's. It was as if he understood the vow she had just made. He had been there from the beginning, protecting this child, and now Mariana would continue that mission. Together, they would ensure that this girl had a future free from fear and filled with love. As the sun began to set outside, casting a warm glow over the hospital, Mariana felt a new chapter of her life unfolding. She wasn't just a nurse anymore, she was becoming something more, a protector, a mother. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the hospital, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. As Mariana sat beside the girl's bed, the weight of everything she had just learned washed over her. The revelation that the girl was Margot's biological daughter filled her with a mix of emotions: relief that the bond she had felt so deeply was real, and sadness at the lengths Margot had gone to protect her. The girl's future was now in Mariana's hands, and she was determined to honor the promise she had made. The girl, still so young and fragile, was awake, her large eyes watching Mariana with quiet curiosity. Lupi, ever vigilant, lifted his head, sensing something significant had shifted. Mariana reached out and took the girl's tiny hand, feeling the warmth of the child's skin beneath her fingertips. "I promise I will take care of you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "No matter what happens, I won't leave you alone." For the first time, the girl's lips curved into a small, hesitant smile, fragile, but filled with hope. It was the first time she had smiled since arriving at the hospital, and Mariana felt her heart swell with love and determination. Tears brimmed in her eyes, and she knew at that moment that she had made the right decision. This was her path now, and she would fight with everything she had to ensure this little girl had a future full of love and security. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal paperwork, meetings with social workers, and interviews with psychologists. The adoption process was long and fraught with bureaucracy, but Mariana remained patient and resolute. Each step brought her closer to officially becoming the girl's mother. Despite the challenges, she knew that every moment of effort was worth it. Lupi, as always, remained at the girl's side, a constant source of comfort. The dog seemed to understand the importance of the moment, never leaving her side, even as Mariana navigated the complex adoption process. His loyalty was unwavering, and he became a beloved presence in the hospital, known not just for his bravery, but for his gentle care of the little girl. One afternoon, when the legal formalities were finally beginning to fall into place, Mariana received an urgent call from Javier. The tone in his voice made her stomach churn with anxiety. She rushed to his office at the police station, her heart heavy with worry. Javier greeted her with a serious expression, leading her into his office and closing the door behind them. "We've uncovered more information about Margot's past, and it's important you know this," he said, handing Mariana a folder filled with documents. "It changes everything." Mariana's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were confidential documents, photos, and letters. Her eyes scanned the pages, absorbing the information. What she found was shocking. "This can't be," she murmured, unable to fully process what she was reading. Javier nodded grimly. "The DNA tests showed Victor wasn't the biological father, but we've found new evidence. Margot left a record with a lawyer shortly before her death, trying to protect the girl's identity. She created a false story to hide her from Victor, but the truth is, this girl is Margot's biological daughter." Mariana blinked, her mind struggling to keep up with the revelation. Margot knew she was in danger, and she did all of this to protect her daughter, she whispered, the pieces falling into place. "Exactly," Javier confirmed. Margot knew that if Victor discovered the truth, he would use the girl for his purposes. She hid her, falsified documents, and tried to protect her from the horrors of Victor's world. But somehow, he began to suspect. And that's what set everything in motion. Mariana felt a wave of relief, knowing that the girl was truly Margot's. The connection she had felt with the child wasn't just emotional, it was real, grounded in a deep truth that Margot had fought to protect. But at the same time, Mariana was overcome with sadness for Margot, a woman who had given everything to shield her daughter from a life of violence and fear. "And the biological father?" she asked, her voice hesitant, fearing there might be more complications. Javier shook his head. "The biological father died before Margot fled from Victor. He never knew about the girl's existence. As far as we know, the girl has no living biological family." Mariana's heart tightened. The girl was alone in the world, and now she was the only one who could provide her with a future. "I'll continue with the adoption," Mariana said, her voice firm and resolute. "No matter what happened in the past, this little girl deserves a future filled with love, and I'll make sure she gets it." Javier smiled, his respect for Mariana clear. "I knew you'd say that," he said gently. "And don't worry, we'll do everything we can to expedite the process. You're not alone in this." The adoption process moved faster than Mariana had expected, thanks to Javier's support and the hospital's backing. Each day, the paperwork moved forward, and each day Mariana grew closer to officially becoming the girl's mother. The bond between them deepened, and with Lupe always at their side, they formed an inseparable trio. One afternoon, as Mariana returned to the hospital after another legal meeting, she found Lupe by the girl's bedside. As always, the little girl was awake, holding a small teddy bear in her hands. Mariana knelt beside her, looking into her bright eyes. "I have something important to tell you, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice full of warmth. "I promised your mom I would take care of you, and I'm going to keep that promise. From now on, you and I are a family." The girl blinked, her tiny face processing the words. Then, in a soft, trembling voice, she whispered, "Mama." It was the first word she had spoken since arriving at the hospital, and it filled Mariana's heart with a joy so profound that she almost cried. She gently took the girl's hand and held it tight, her voice full of emotion. "Yes, sweetheart," Mariana replied, her eyes brimming with tears. "Mama is here, and I'm not going anywhere." Lupe, sensing the significance of the moment, rested his head on Mariana's lap, his soft eyes reflecting the same love and loyalty. Together, they had formed a family, a bond that went beyond blood, built on trust, love, and the determination to protect each other. The day of the adoption hearing arrived sooner than expected, and though Mariana was nervous, she felt ready. With Lupe by her side and the girl in her arms, she walked into the courtroom, determined to court the family they had become. She knew that this was only the beginning of their journey together. The road ahead would be full of challenges, but with love, determination, and the support of those around them, Mariana, the girl, and Lupe were ready to face whatever the future held together. As the judge's words echoed in the courtroom, "I grant you full custody and approve the adoption. As of today, you are legally the mother of this girl." Mariana felt a flood of emotions. Tears brimmed in her eyes, but they were tears of profound joy and relief. She hugged Sofia tightly, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. The long battle was finally over. She was now Sofia's mother in every way that mattered, and nothing in the world could take her away. When Mariana stepped outside the courthouse, the sun was shining brilliantly in the sky, as if the universe itself were celebrating the moment with them. She looked down at the little girl in her arms, her daughter, and smiled. She thought of Margot, of the sacrifice she had made, and felt that she was honoring her memory in the best possible way. Beside them, Lupe walked with calm satisfaction, his mission finally complete. Sofia was safe, and they were a family. As they strolled through the bustling streets of Guadalajara, Mariana felt an inner peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. The future was uncertain, as life always is, but she was ready to face whatever came their way with love, courage, and determination. She had fought for this little girl, and now they had a life to build together. Months passed, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. Santa Clara Hospital returned to its usual quiet, but for Mariana, everything felt transformed. Her home, once silent and lonely, was now filled with laughter, the joyful barking of dogs, and the energy of a child exploring the world for the first time with the freedom and safety she had never known. Sofia, although still young and marked by the trauma of her early years, began to flourish. Under Mariana's loving care, she blossomed into a happy and curious child. Every day her confidence grew, and every night she slept peacefully, knowing she was loved and protected. Lupe, the dog who had been the first to protect Sofia, remained by her side, but now he was no longer alone. One day, Mariana received news that made her decision to adopt Sofia feel even more complete. A local animal protection group had found Lupe's puppies. Without hesitation, Mariana decided to adopt them as well. Her house, once so quiet, was now bursting with life as 4 playful puppies joined the family, each bringing their joy and energy to the home. The puppies' small, energetic bundles of fur quickly made themselves at home, running through the garden, tumbling over each other in the grass, and following Sofia wherever she went. Lupe watched them with pride, his watchful eyes always on his family. It was as if he understood that his protective duty now extended to his pups as well. Spring came to Guadalajara, bringing with it warmth and the vibrant colors of the city in bloom. The dark days of winter filled with fear, uncertainty, and danger were behind them. Victor Ortiz had been convicted, and the shadow he had cast over their lives had finally lifted. A bright future filled with hope and endless possibilities lay ahead. One particularly sunny morning, Mariana decided to take Sofia, Lupi, and the puppies to the Metropolitan Park, a place she had always dreamed of visiting with her daughter but had never had the chance to. Now, with the weight of fear lifted from their lives, they could enjoy the simple pleasures of life. Sofia, now 3 years old, held Mariana's hand as they walked through the park, her eyes wide with wonder at the world around her. Birds sang in the trees, children played in the distance, and the sun warmed the earth beneath their feet. Mariana watched her daughter in awe. Sofia's once fearful expression had been replaced by curiosity and joy. Her brown hair glistened in the sunlight, and her laughter, pure and unrestrained, filled the air. It was a sound that made Mariana's heart swell with happiness. Around them, the puppies raced through the grass, their boundless energy fueling their exploration of every corner of the park. They rolled, tumbled, and chased each other, the picture of carefree happiness. Lupi walked steadily beside Mariana and Sofia, his posture still protective but more relaxed. He knew, in his canine way, that his family was finally safe. They found a quiet, shady spot beneath a large tree, where Mariana spread out a blanket for a picnic. Sofia played with her toys, giggling as the puppies nudged her and tried to play along. Lupi lay down beside them, his eyes reflecting calm satisfaction as he watched over his family. For Mariana, this moment felt perfect. It was a reminder of how far they had come, of the battles they had fought and won. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led them here to a peaceful day in the park, surrounded by love and laughter. As she watched Sofia play, Mariana's thoughts turned to the future. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, but with Sofia by her side and Lupi and his pups completing their family, she felt ready to face anything. Together they would build a life filled with love, joy, and security, a life that Sofia deserved, and one that Mariana was proud to give her. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 6 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. And so, as the sun set on that beautiful day in the park, Mariana's heart was filled with gratitude. They had come through the darkest of times, and now, together, they were embracing the light. "Mommy, look!" Sofia's excited voice filled the air as she held up a delicate yellow flower she had found in the grass. Her eyes sparkled with pride as she showed it to Mariana. "It's pretty, right?" "Right." Mariana smiled warmly, taking the flower from Sofia's small hand and gently tucking it behind her ear. "It's beautiful, just like you," she replied, her heart swelling with love. She marveled at how much Sofia had blossomed into a joyful, carefree child despite the darkness they had left behind. The puppies, sensing the light-hearted moment, rushed over to Sofia, sniffing curiously at the flower tucked behind her ear. Their playful antics made Sofia laugh, a sound that never failed to fill Mariana with happiness. Watching her daughter, surrounded by joy and love, Mariana's heart overflowed. The life they had built together felt like a dream after all they had endured. Later that evening, when they returned home, Mariana went through their bedtime routine, tucking Sofia into bed. The girl fell asleep quickly, clutching her teddy bear with a peaceful smile on her face. The puppies, always eager to be near Sofia, curled up around her, their small bodies creating a scene of pure innocence and peace. Mariana lingered for a moment, watching her daughter sleep, her mind reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. She quietly left the room, and as always, Lupi and the puppies followed her to the living room. Mariana sat on the sofa, her thoughts drifting through the past and the present, the moments of fear that had given way to the joy they now shared. The puppies played around her feet, their carefree energy filling the room, while Lupi lay beside her, resting his head on her lap. She stroked his fur gently, her fingers tracing the familiar warmth of his loyal presence. "Thank you, Lupi," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "Thank you for everything." Lupi looked up at her with eyes that seemed to carry a deep, unspoken understanding. His gaze was full of wisdom, loyalty, and a love that transcended words. He knew his role in protecting Sofia had become so much more than just duty. It was the foundation of the family they had built together. With his puppies now a part of that family, his mission had come full circle. Time passed, and the fear and uncertainty that had once shadowed their lives faded into distant memories. Mariana, Sofia, Lupi, and the puppies created a life filled with happiness and peace, a life built on love, trust, and resilience. The painful past no longer defined them. It was replaced by a present filled with laughter and a future that held the promise of endless joy. Margot's sacrifice, Lupi's bravery, and Mariana's determination had woven them together, creating an unbreakable bond. This was a family born not of blood, but of shared struggle and unconditional love, one that nothing could ever break apart. As the sun set over Guadalajara once more, casting a golden glow across the city, Mariana knew she had finally found where she was meant to be, at home, with her daughter and faithful companions by her side. This was the new beginning she had dreamed of, a life full of love and safety, surrounded by the joy that only family can bring. And as she looked around her, at the playful puppies and the peaceful face of her sleeping daughter, she knew the future was bright. The past had made them stronger, but it was the present and the love they shared that promised a lifetime of happiness ahead. As we come to the end of this heartwarming journey, we reflect on the power of love, resilience, and the bonds that can form even in the most difficult circumstances. Mariana, Sofia, and Lupi's story is a testament to how, through courage and determination, we can build a family not just by blood, but by choice, trust, and unconditional love. What have you learned from their story? What lesson will you take with you and apply to your own life? We would love to hear your thoughts. Please share one thing you've learned from this story that you will bring into practice in the comments below. If you liked this video, please leave your comment. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring stories. Thank you for watching.